Good evening. Today is the 14th day of February. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, and welcome to the Hamilton Report. Happy Valentine's Day, friends, and I'm so happy that you decided to spend a little bit of time with us this evening on this romantic holiday. And the topic of tonight's show may not be romantic, but it certainly will be informative. My guest this evening, and she's on her way to the studio now, will be with us shortly. And I'm delighted that she is with us because she is one of the people I respect so very, very much in our state capitol. Before I introduce her, though, I want to just say a word about all of the bills that the Oklahoma Democratic Party has been mentioning from the GOP. And I don't want you to be discouraged by the bills that we are discussing. Rather, I mean, if you just take them on their face, they certainly are uh, really tragic. But the reason that we continue to share this information with you is because we believe it is critical that Democrats understand the ways in which so many Republican legislators are attempting to run our lives while they continue to say things about, their body, their choice, and that's true for men, but not for women. The bills that are so-called school choice bills that are actually nothing more than the next step toward privatization of public schools. And there are so many that are just simply performative, that are aimed at getting headlines, even if the lawmaker knows that there is no place for them to go. So that's why we are intent on letting you know about some of these very dangerous bills so that as the session really moves into full swing, you are armed with the information you need to reach out and talk to your legislators, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, because they have to listen to you. You may not have voted for them, but that's okay. They are still required to take your calls. All calls are logged, and it's very, very important that we get used to reaching out to our legislators. As a matter of fact, my two legislators are on speed dial on my phone. And with that, there's probably no better way to introduce to you my guest this evening, who is also my senator. And I'm very, very happy to welcome to the Hamilton Report Senate Minority Leader Kay Floyd. Senator Floyd, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well, but I haven't just endured the first week of session, so I'm probably a little more stayed right now than you are. How's it going so far?
Well, as you say, we just finished up our first week and now we're in week two. And we have a new floor leader who, for those of you who may not know, the floor leader is the conductor of the train, basically, and decides what bills go into committees and what bills that come out of committees go to the floor and in what order they go to the floor. And so this year we have a new floor leader who decided that we were going to begin committee work and floor work the first week, which is highly unusual. Usually you have the state of the state on Monday, and then the rest of the week is bills being assigned to different committees, committee chairs, setting agendas for the following week. And so to start committee work the day after state of the state was pretty different for all of us. So we began this week today with some committees that have already met twice now
Wow, in
in
the first week.
in the first week. So the legislative schedule is set up to where we only have 4 weeks to get bills through committee. And that sounds like a long time, except you have to remember that the committees only meet once a week. So you only have 1 in 4 shots of getting your bill to a committee and out of a committee within that 4 week process. And then we go to floor work, which is where all the bills come out of committee and they go to the floor and are reviewed by the Senate as a whole. So it's fast and furious. This is my 10th year, and I've never seen it move so quickly.
You say your 10th year, and that's it's kind of hard for me to believe because I met you for the first time. It was at a Christmas party when you were first running for HD 88, and I enjoyed that meeting. But to think that it's been 10 years that you've been serving the people, not just of your Senate district and your House district before, but all of Oklahoma. And my gosh, the time really seems to have moved quickly, at least from my perspective. I know that there are days for you that must seem like weeks or months long.
Yeah, days. It when I look at the 10 years, it does seem to have flown past, but you're right. There's some days when it's so long. But I'm up for reelection, and so I decided to go ahead and run and get at least 2 more years. The House runs every 2 years. The Senate, however, runs every 4 years. And since we have term limits, which now that I've been in office and see how it works and how long it takes to really figure out what's going on, I think we should expand term limits. But anyway, so I am going to run again. We file in April, and then if I'm elected, I'll serve 2 years, and then I'll term out in 2 years. So that would make this year and 2 more would be 3 more years.
Well, I'm delighted that you decided to give it another shot because your work is not done. From your perspective as minority leader of the Senate, what are some of the things that you are particularly paying attention to this year?
Well, I mean, Scott, you've got a amazing background and knowledge of the political system, so you probably already have figured this one out. But it's an election year, and I heard you mention in your opening about the some of the bills that are being filed and the motivation behind that. And you can tell during an election year what people are trying to accomplish. Whether, are you running a bill to make a statement? Are you running a bill so you can get a press release or a press conference? Or do you really want to solve a problem that exists? And there's a mixture of all of that. You can also tell that we have a Democrat back in the White House, just to be candid with you all, because you're hearing a lot of rhetoric about federal overreach and the federal government doing this and the federal government doing that. Well, it's just not that different. And the federal government, as far as regulation in Oklahoma, the legislature still has a supermajority Republican in the House, in the Senate, the governor, every statewide elected officials are Republicans. So there's nothing the feds can do to us that's as tragic or as severe as they're saying. They're just using it to try to stir up a lot of voters, make them angry, and get them to the polls.
Okay, it's really, there's an incongruity when Republicans consistently talk about federal overreach, and yet so many of the bills we've seen are frankly state overreach of municipalities, things that would undo existing laws in municipalities, protections that are in place for children, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real disconnect to me to hear people screaming about federal overreach when they're pushing overreach of their own. With that being said, we're also seeing bills that claim that the state law would supersede federal law. Now, that's something that we learned in fifth grade civics, that's not the way it works. But how is it that they're able to produce this kind of nonsense, frankly?
Well, when you're in a supermajority, you don't have to be too concerned about whether your bill is going to be found to be unconstitutional or actually is a bill that once passed into law is going to be able to actually be enacted. Or so you've seen a lot in the years I've been up there. I've seen an increased number of the kind of bill you're talking about, and it's basically they're called preemption bills. And it's where a senator or representative will run a bill that preempts the city, in my case, Oklahoma City, because that's where my district is. It preempts Oklahoma City from, this was an example from 4 years ago, preempted Oklahoma City from passing any sort of ordinance that limited the drilling of oil and gas within the city limits of Oklahoma City. Now that was a law that was on the books, had been on the books since 1910, that you couldn't drill in downtown Oklahoma City, and that was an ordinance. So somebody came in about 6 years ago and ran a bill that said they repealed that law, and they said, and then the city can't pass any regulations or ordinances which preempt the state's control over oil and gas production. And it's just gotten progressively worse. They've tried it with cigarette smoking in restaurants. They've done it with seat belts. mandatory seatbelt laws for children under the age of 5. They kicked that one out, and then once they defeat a bill, then they go in and preempt that subject matter topic, and then thereafter you can't pass any sort of law if you're a municipality by ordinance and try to control within your city and town what you want done. So to your point a minute ago, where they talk about federal overreach, it's completely state overreach. They preempt cities and municipalities all the time, and it gets worse every year.
Well, one of the bills that I'm paying particular attention to is House Bill 2973, which would enshrine conversion therapy into law. And as I'm sure you know, Norman has an ordinance that prohibits conversion therapy within the city of Norman. This bill takes direct aim at that, saying that this bill would supersede local laws. This is a child health care bill that's aiming to take away quality care from young people, and it's I mean, the way that they're emboldened right now, and that's the best way I can put it. They seem to have great courage in the way that they talk about minorities, about women, as if there were no repercussions to be had. And this is a little bit off topic, but something I was thinking about last week, just before the State of the State address. What is it like for you and your colleagues in such a small minority to get up and go into the Capitol every day, knowing what you're up against? What is it that motivates you to just keep going, and in your case, running again for office?
Well, it's different for every single person. It truly is. It's an individual decision to get up every morning. It's a calling for some of us. It's a passion for others. It's a combination. So I can't speak to why anybody else does it, but I will tell you that the reason I got into politics was because prior to this, I was an administrative law judge for the state for 23 years. And I had a lot of friends that were politicians, and I would have lobbyists and politicians ask me to talk to them about their bills and just sort of a fresh set of eyes and take a look at it. And I started noticing as we saw a shift from the balance of Democrat and Republican to more of Republicans becoming more and more of the majority, less and less members wanting to talk candidly about their bills and the constitutionality of their bills. And I think the final straw for me was when I was talking to a member of the House of Representatives, and he had asked me to look at his bill, and I did, and we were sitting in his office, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think it's unconstitutional." And we went back and forth and for a while, and he finally looked at me and he said, "Well, I just don't care." And I left the Capitol. I didn't go back for months, even though I had some people call and say, will you come up? And I go, no, I'm not going to talk to people who don't want to listen to what I have to say. And thereafter, it started just going around in my head. And by the time I looked up, I decided Al McCaffrey was a dear friend. He was getting ready to leave the House and run for the Senate. And I went and visited with him. And after that, I filed, and here I am.
It was actually Al that introduced me to you the first time. Mm-hmm. In saying that you have no interest in talking to people that won't listen. One of the things that I've observed about you in committee and in your conversations on the floor, you are what I would call a very sober senator. You are very measured with your questions. They're thoughtful. They're not meant to be confusing. They're meant to clarify. And that's something I really do appreciate about you. And I'll tell you, I don't know how you keep your cool in especially some of the committee meetings, because that's some Wild West territory there in some of those.
Well, I will tell you, and I appreciate the compliment. Thank you, because I enjoy committee work and I enjoy floor work, and I think that you just have to be respectful with people if you want to be respected. And when you're in the minority, Scott, I tell my caucuses frequently, you've got two main things going for you. you've got your relationships that you can build, and you've got your reputation. And that's it. And if you can maintain those things, then I think it inspires a mutual respect with your colleagues, whether they're Democrat or Republican. I hope so, at least. But I think my legal background's been very helpful to be, especially when I was on the bench, because you had to be measured and sort of stoic and not let anybody know what you're thinking, even when you were disgusted or wanted to laugh out loud because there was an argument being made that was so incredibly ridiculous. You just didn't know how you were going to hold it together. So I had a little bit of practice before I got there.
Let me ask you, what was your reaction to the state of the state?
I think maybe everyone tuned in right now perhaps saw some of our press conferences after the State of the State.
Yes.
And Leader Virgin, Emily Virgin, who I have the utmost respect for, I served with her when I was in the House, said that she thought last year was the most partisan State of the State she'd ever seen. And she's been there longer than I have, but she said that this year she thought it was even more so. And I completely agree. It was so partisan, and that is so unnecessary, because the state of Oklahoma, the problems that affect Democrats and Republicans affect Democrats and Republicans. There's no such thing as somebody told me a road that's a Democrat road and a bridge that's a Republican bridge. It's just, we've got major issues in this state, and we all are being affected by them. The pandemic is a perfect example. And it doesn't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't care what your skin color is. It doesn't care what your gender is. It just doesn't care. It affects us all equally and tragically. And education, another one of the 4 priorities of my caucus, is education affects everybody. Now, maybe you choose private schools. Maybe you can afford that. Maybe you homeschool. That's something that's your choice too, if that's what you believe is the best interest of your children. But education affects us all in different ways. So I was very disappointed. It didn't have to be that partisan. And the governor's, well, I'll leave it at that. It just didn't have to be that partisan, and we could all be working together. And it just doesn't seem to be his style.
Yeah, and that was loud and clear to me in the speech, that it was, not only was it ultra partisan, but it seemed intent on just dismissing a whole bunch of Oklahomans, and I found that really, it's sad when the primary leader of the state disenfranchises so many people, and it's not the first time, and it won't be the last, but it's still frustrating. But I was awfully happy with the way that you and your colleagues came out very quickly with super thought out responses to that, because it gave people a chance, I think, to see what they didn't see in the address. And for that, I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I will tell you that one of the things I think that stuck out to me was the governor's brand new position to give a pay raise, teacher pay raise to Oklahoma teachers, which that's great. Democrats have been talking about it now for over 10 years that I've been up there, over 2 decades. I mean, Democrats have historically been champions of public education, and we will stay that way because it is critical to who we are as a country and as a state. But to stand up there in an election year and say, yes, I think we should give them 6 figures. First of all, let's hear some details, because that's pretty easy to stand up there and make those kind of sweeping comments. And when you start getting into the details, it's not going to be just everybody gets it. It's going to turn into the haves and the have-nots.
That's right.
Which is not productive in politics. It's political, but it's not productive. But honestly, and I'd say this to all of you listening, if you want to know what a person's attitude about education is, don't listen to what they say. Watch how they act. And just a few weeks ago, the governor did an executive order, which basically said, if you want to take a day off, you're a state employee and you want to take a day off, then you can do that. And you can go teach our kids. Now, to say that anyone who just happens to take a day off is qualified to go into a classroom and teach our children, that speaks volumes. Don't listen to what he's saying about giving him a pay raise. Look at how he's acting toward them. He has that executive order to me was reflective of a disrespect and a total lack of understanding on what our teachers do and the training they go through and the education they go through and the continuing education they have to go through to learn how to and to continue to be on top of the best teaching techniques that they can use. I mean, my grandmother was a teacher, my mom was a teacher, my younger sister, and now my niece. And I watch how many hours and how much time they spend. And it's just disrespectful. And I had constituents call me. It's just disrespectful to assume that a person with an afternoon off can go to the classroom and teach our children. It's just disrespectful.
Yes, it is, and frankly, it was disrespectful to students as well, because you've got a classroom full of kids, and if a teacher's been out for a while, the chances are good that there are not adequate sub plans for days when there are multiple days that you're out sick, and so he said the word teach, but really it was babysitting. And that's unfortunate for all of our school children. Let's take a bit of a turn now, Senator, and look at some of the things that you're actually excited about this season, or this session rather.
Well, criminal justice reform, I think, is really on my mind right now, simply because Judiciary Committee tomorrow is meeting, and we have 3 very large criminal justice reform bills. There's one that's over 1,000 pages long. There's another one that's about 171 pages, I believe. And criminal justice reform has been something that Democrats and my caucus, and I believe the House Democratic Caucus, have championed for a very, very long time. And I think that we saw sort of a shift when Chris Steele years ago sort of, he sort of saw the light and came in and really started to bring in Republicans to the discussion and business into the discussion. Senator George Young, whom I serve with, and Senator Kevin Matthews, who I serve with right now, both of which I serve with right now, very prominent in their African-American community. George is in Oklahoma City. Kevin is in Tulsa. And they have both been pushing and working within the communities and within behind the scenes often to push for criminal justice reform. So that's been an incredible help. So that's one of the things that I'm optimistic and kind of excited about, because the bills tomorrow will address the classification of crimes in the state, and reclassification to make them more the punishment fit the crime. Because
great.
So that's the over 1,000 page, and that's going to be in Judiciary tomorrow. I don't know how long we'll spend debating that, but the author is a Republican, Senator Rader out of Tulsa, and it was a good choice to choose a Republican. So he's going to be running it, and then Senator Weaver, also a Republican who's engaged in public safety, former law enforcement, is running the other one, which deals with no fees and fines. It also deals with classifications. So.
Oh, that's terrific, because so often we hear real life stories of people who are in jail just because they can't pay the fines to get out of jail.
Right.
And so, that's so damaging to entire families, and in some cases generations within a family. So that is exciting.
I think there's finally a recognition, at least maybe out in the public when they're looking at it. I don't know. There's some of my members, not my members, some of the members in the House and the Senate that still don't either realize or acknowledge that our criminal justice system in our state disproportionately affects people of color.
Yes.
And it especially, and along the same lines, we had the highest incarceration rate in the country of women. And because we have the highest incarceration rate in the country, and our country has the highest incarceration rate in the world, then we incarcerate more women in the state of Oklahoma than any civilized country. So,
And how many of their children wind up in the system?
well, that's the other part of it is, if the people have an average of, if the woman has an average of 1.5 child, or one, even just one child, every one of those children is affected in a tragic way. So we've got a long way to go, but we need to understand that this isn't a across the board affects everyone equally. It doesn't. It affects women and it affects people of color disproportionately higher than it does white population and white male population.
Senator, if you could ask for help and support of our viewers tonight, what would that look like for you? What would you encourage them to do?
For me personally, just if you have information or questions, just reach out to me and let me know what you think, or let me know what your question is. If you want to be a resource or have a resource that you can make available, that's always very helpful. I get some of the best information regarding issues from my constituency. We've got, after redistricting, each one of the Senate members has 82,000 people in their districts. So I'm never going to hear from all 82,000 people, but if there's something going on in your neighborhood or in your schools or in your, in whatever it is that you do, whether you're a student or a stay-at-home mom or dad or just whatever you do, if something that's going to be passed or something you're hearing about is going to affect your life, then let me know. Because sometimes we don't see what it's like. I don't know how it's going to affect you personally. May not know the ramifications of this particular bill for your life because I don't understand your profession or know enough about your profession to connect the dots all the way down that line. So feedback to me is critical. That's one of the most important things, is that for my constituents to give me feedback, which means they have to engage in the process.
Yes.
And pay attention to what's going on. So we're on the same team, but we're rowing different oars.
One of the things that the party offers is a bill tracking service on our website so that people can stay up to date on issues. It's broken down by categories. Alicia Sullivan, one of our viewers tonight, says that she's concerned about a bill that would allow 18-year-olds to open carry. And so bills about gun control or gun safety are all together. Healthcare are all together, education. So it makes it easy for people to know what's happening, where in the process a particular bill is. And so I'm going to encourage our viewers to check out our Fast Democracy bill tracker. And then hopefully that will lead to more conversation with you and your colleagues. Senator Floyd, this time has gone very quickly tonight, and I am so appreciative of you giving up some time, not just in the midst of a very, very busy session, but also on Valentine's Day. So it has been a pleasure visiting with you, and know that I'll be staying in touch with you, and you'll be in touch with me. And as things continue to progress in both the House and the Senate, we'll look forward to hearing more from you on the progress that we're making, because I believe that this is a year when we really will make progress, especially with leadership like yours. So from all of us, thank you for the great work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Great. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Well, friends, I hope that you gleaned some information from Senator Kay Floyd. Always a pleasure talking with her. And it's very clear to me that she has the best interests of Oklahomans, all Oklahomans, at heart. That's what we need. That's what we need to make life better for all of us in Oklahoma. I'm so tired of people posting on my social media, if you don't like it here, get out. Well, that's not the way we do things. Instead, we stay to make things better. And that's what I'm doing. And that's what I know you're doing as well. So thank you for that. And thank you for being with us this evening. I would like to invite you back next week. It's President's Day, and I was going to be off, but I'm not going to miss an opportunity to visit with the House Minority Leader, Emily Virgin. She's agreed to be with us next Monday evening at 6:30 to talk about her hopes and dreams for the year ahead. And this will be her final term because she's term limiting out. So I'm anxious to hear what she has to say, and I hope that you'll join us then. Friends, from all of us here at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you sincerely for being with us this evening, for sharing this broadcast, for helping us share a message of democracy and hope in our state. Until next week, have a great time, be careful, take good care of yourself, and happy Valentine's Day. Good night.